Hello guys, this is Low Tech Gaming here. So, the Resistance phase was well, it wasn't released. It was released with the update, but we didn't get a chance to actually try it out until the war ended. And what is it? While the initial concept idea of it is really interesting, as well as what is it? The the overall experience initially was really good. I I think there needs to be some improvements to the face to make it more fleshed out, to give it what's it, more longevity, as well as to make it more interesting. So what I mean by that is, what is it? So the resistance phase has well, I'm gonna say that it has really, I guess, two different time zones, so two phases to the phase itself. The first phase being the initial phase, where uprisings start showing up in regions. Essentially, what an uprising is essentially a uprising takes place in a town, essentially. And in that uprising phase or so, in that situation, the town swaps over to the resistance side, or so, whatever faction lost the war. And not only does the town hall switch, but the safe house and whatever, most of the buildings actually within the town just automatically switch over to the other side, which is really interesting or so, as it gives not only the town hall but then all the surrounding buildings over to the resistance, giving them a good foothold to start their resistance operations in. From there, it's up to because what is it? This works better when it happens in regions that are completely, isolated from the front line, essentially. So, for example, the war situation we had, where the Wardens lost and the Cloners won, when a town hall showed up in the Great March, it was the best thing ever, as we could just automatically deploy huge huge amounts. I'm not going to use fancy words. It's like late at night, but we could just deploy huge amounts of our forces from our home base and get them instantly into the Great March. We had like maybe, I want to say about maybe 60 guys or so. 60 or like 70 guys instantly get teleported over to the Great March. We then made branching operations into the Great March, hitting multiple different town halls. Unfortunately, despite the fact that there was no real conflict in the Great March whatsoever, it was still heavily fortified, and we couldn't hit everything. And on top of that, the huge amounts of people that we had operating in the area resulted in us losing huge amounts of equipment, to the point where we just ran out of basic materials, rifles, ammunition, etc. We could acquire huge amounts of storm tanks, but we just didn't have the ammunition for them all, which was unfortunate. The what is it? It was fun until we just ran out of like weapons to actually use. And then from there, so we just slowly, grounded down by colonial armor. I think the biggest problem, I guess, is the fact that, well, I guess what you all resistance is supposed to show up and get destroyed or so, and most likely, unless the war was ended in short order, the enemy's going to have battle tank supremacy over you, and there's going to be nothing you can do against them, just due to the fact that the mechanics for battle tanks makes it so anything short of an incompetent battle tank crew, or just an entire enemy team or so, would not be able to even dent a battle tank. Or another battle tank, essentially. So, I mean, I think this is fine. This is fine, so you should be outgunned by the enemy. You are a resistance after all, so if you could just fabricate battle tanks to match the oppressing or superior forces, then you wouldn't be much of a resistance, would you? No. I think the problem, or the solution I have for the problem being that you're just not able to make weapons unless the town you've taken happens to be a town that also has a weapon facility or a, what is it, a refinery to make BMATs or so. If it doesn't have all these things, you will run out of supplies and you get crushed. My solution to this would be to make it so the, what is it, the resistant camp, the camp that you can use as a forward operation base or so, it's really only, its only gimmick is the fact that it can, what is it, I mean, actually no, there's not, well, it's, I guess it is a forward, yeah, it's a forward operation base, I guess, so it does, I'm not entirely sure if this is true, but it apparently casts a, yeah, it can supply defenses around its location, which is really useful, especially because of the fact that you're not going to be able to build a CV, so being able to build it with hammers if you have enough base, BMATs is actually very, very useful. I think the fundamental problem, the fundamental thing I would like to add to that is not only the ability to supply fortifications around the resistance camp, but to also be able to actually have some limited manufacturing capabilities there, like the ability to make like basic weapons like rifles or ammunition, and the ability to make at least like basic materials or so, things that can be used to, you know, to spread the resistance out essentially. So you can set up all these camps or so to increase your production capabilities, but they're probably going to have much less durability than a forward operations base and even a town essentially. So I think overall I think more emphasis should be put into giving more, I guess, flexibility in terms of production, also more opportunities for the resistance forces to actually build resources, build weapons, get BMATs, so gather resources besides just taking them from the enemy. As even like, what is it, resistance forces in France and Poland, while they still got arms from the Allies, they still were able to make minor weapons or so essentially. So they were able to acquire resources not only from the Germans but even manufacture some themselves. Granted, the resources they got from the Allies and what they stole from the Germans were lawfully superior to what they could make on hand or so. It was still something or so. So maybe the ability to make pistols and pistol ammunition, maybe revolver ammunition, rifles or so. Maybe not SMGs and definitely not storm rifles or carbines or so. Possibly shotguns. I have no idea. But, you know, just the ability to... Oh, yeah, and then sticky grenades or so. I mean, sticky grenades, for the most part, will just improvise explosives that you put, I don't know, some type of, you know, sticky glue or alloy on or so, and you just run up and try to use it as an improvised weapon. So I could see, you know, non-conventional forces being able to manufacture these things, essentially. So the ability for resistance camps to be able to facilitate some form of production or so would be nice. So maybe you could have it where each camp can only build one thing, so you can't just have one camp doing everything. And maybe make it so it requires, I don't know, it requires like different tiers, so you have to like use more and more BMATs and more time to actually get a resistance camp up to a higher level. So I wouldn't use upgrade pods because of the fact that it would be almost impossible to acquire them in a late war scenario essentially. But just, I think some means of production would be useful. Okay, so going into the second phase of the resistance phase, this is where I have the biggest issue, because the resistance phase kind of doesn't have a second phase from this, because what I was talking about with the first phase is that this part of the resistance phase only lasts a couple of hours. After that, the resistance faction stops being able to, get uprisings in regions, essentially. And then you're back to square one, with the enemy having control over, most of the map? Just basing it off of what happened today, or not today, yesterday, because this is the 1st of April. The resistance uprisings that we set up, all of them were crushed by battle tanks, essentially. They had really no chance once actual colonial armored units showed up. But on top of that, they just stopped happening. So most people were just wondering what we were supposed to do afterwards, essentially. As with technology slowly decreasing, all options of taking on the battle tanks became, fuel and fuel, essentially. Granted, I haven't checked on the actual rate of it. I think the only technology I saw that was lost, but granted this was hours ago, was the HE shows. I don't know how quickly technology is lost, essentially. But it just turned into the same world conquest, except for there was no victory condition. The enemy still had most of the territory, most of the resources, and fundamentally not really that much change. I mean, I'm looking at the map right now, and it looks like we actually made a... This is as of, I guess, late, 31st of March or so, basically. Approximately about, I guess, 12 hours into the resistance phase. We seem to have moved into Endless Shore, whether it expands... whether the expanse is still contested. We're moving to Callahan's Passage. Morning County's a wreck. I mean... I'm not really taking this back very quickly, so I think most of our success has to deal with the fact that there just aren't that many people playing. As I guess another side to the resistance phase that after the uprisings stop happening, it's just kind of boring because of the fact that the gimmick is kind of lost. The uprisings stop happening, and the only, you don't really feel like resistance anymore. So at least when the uprisings are happening, you're popping out everywhere, so just raiding enemy forces behind the lines or so. It feels interesting. It feels, you kind of just get into like a role-playing field or so. I was shouting Viva the Resistance, blah, words. I think I called the operation the Warden Liberation Front or the Warden Revolution Front or so. We were all just shouting cliche resistance jargon or so. It was so much fun, and that just all died once the uprising stopped because we couldn't get behind the lines or so, just show up out of nowhere. So part of the that mechanic, when it just disappeared, it just wasn't that fun anymore. So I have to say, and I just got off or so because of the fact that I didn't want to go to the front line and fight the same battle I was fighting the last couple of days, essentially. So I was hoping that the uprisings would keep going on or so, as I thought that the phase would turn into a situation where you'd have it where all these uprisings would take place, maybe one after another. One would pop up, and it would lead to the decimation of maybe half the region or so, maybe a quarter of the region. It would be pacified, but huge amounts of resources would be used and lost. All of it being the enemies, because none of them were created by us for the most part. They would all be from captured colonial towns and whatever else we could find. That would all get destroyed, essentially. They would clean up, maybe take back the town hall, and then another uprising would show up, and the same thing would happen again. And slowly over time, they would start to take more and more attrition damage. So they would lose those supplies as we would be using them against them, essentially, slowly but surely. And if they didn't pacify the uprisings fast enough, they would get out of control and could probably even threaten the entirety of the region, essentially. But this didn't happen. Instead, the uprisings were limited to only a couple of hours after the war ended, essentially. So, with that mechanic gone, we were just a conventional army again, just fighting on the front line or so. I mean, I feel like the only mechanic that we had was Resistance Camp, which does make it a little easier to, I guess, handle logistics as well as increase the, the supply zones for fortifications. But that was about it, essentially. So after that, you don't feel like a resistance anymore. You just feel like a conventional army with a nice, cool building that's pretty useful. No, so overall, I feel that for the resistance phase, the uprisings should just keep going on. Literally, they should just keep going on constantly, and because it just gets boring. And it's just I don't know, because one thing you could say about the skirmishes was the fact that just put everyone on an even playing field. You really just went back to Foxhole before World Conquest, essentially, in there. But with Resistance phase, or with the Resistance phase, with uprisings stopping after a couple hours, it just turns into World Conquest where you're already defeated and there's really nothing left. I mean, if you couldn't win with everything on the line or so, how do you win afterwards? Because I don't think they added any other features to the Resistance phase other than the fact that the tech tree declines over time. The Resistance faction gets the Resistance camp the Resistance camp structure, words. The ability to have uprisings. The uprisings only occurring for the first few hours. What is it? Having the town, the town hall flip, yada yada, and then the AI defenses being disabled. Other than that, there is nothing else to the Resistance phase. So, I mean, I think it needs to be fleshed out more. So, overall, they have actually, no, they did a little disclaimer when the Resistance phase was going on, saying that it was a test, so that it was going to probably be changed in the next patch or so. They basically said the same thing about the relic tanks as well, the relic vehicles. That's something for another day. But overall, I think for the Resistance phase as it stands right now, is that they need to make it so the uprisings consistently happen. Like, have it where uprising will start again after the last city in like a uprising region is disabled or destroyed, essentially. So while you may have lost in this region, so the Resistance lost in this region, another Resistance group pops up, and another one, and another one, and another one. So you have the situation where the victors have a constant threat they can fight against with their overwhelming arms of battle tanks and artillery. And the Resistance members always have a new area to go to where they can just spread their operations out or so and try to see how far they can get. I think it would be fun this way, so essentially, as this just goes on and on until, all the technology is gone and everyone's just fighting with whatever they have left, essentially. So I don't know how you translate this back into World Conquest. Maybe it just always sets us after after the last technology is lost or so, and we just return to day one of World Conquest. I have no idea. But I think the uprisings need to consistently happen to continue engagement, or just to continue player engagement in the actual phase, because as it stands, it's just not really that entertaining, essentially. So it really just, yeah, it just evolves into like a, not an overtime for World Conquest because it's already over, so, but just as a, hey, so the Colonials won, but you can keep fighting if you want, essentially. And maybe that's, I have to go into some more of the dev blogs or so, because I read all of them and watch all the YouTube videos that they do post. I'm not entirely sure if they just want it, well, it would slowly turn into a mess where people would have towns everywhere, so it would just be all this random chaos, essentially. Like, everywhere the resistance has gone, no one's rebuilt the towns, which is very interesting. I mean, besides the Great Monster, so it seems that the Colonials just gave up and just moved on to the next one or so. So I'm thinking it would be cool if just this constant amount of resistance makes it so the Colonials just don't... Or, I say Colonials just because it's the example that I have. I mean, it could be the Wardens, it could be either side or so. But the Victors or so, if they're just going from region to region, pacifying the resistance, not being able to spend time building up the actual town halls again, essentially, over and over. And it just devolves into all this chaos and confusion. I think that would be kind of interesting. To just have this map with all these different buildings all over the place. Just something away, so far away from the symmetry of warfare that we're used to would be very nice. And then on a more minor level, I think to add more longevity to the uprisings is to give the resistance camps the ability to manufacture weapons and BMATs on a smaller scale, limit the amount of weapons that they can make, but give them the ability to actually produce something, albeit at a very slow rate, because while resisting with pistols is fun and hilarious, it is ultimately fruitless, as rushing battle tanks with pistols it doesn't go well. So I mean, I thought it would go better, but no, it doesn't accomplish anything. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. There's potential here, but I feel like it just needs a little bit more to turn into something that could possibly replace the skirmish, mode or so that you'd play in between world conquests. I just feel like there has to be a little bit more added to this phase here. And yeah, if they add more to the phase, make it more interactive or so, really get that theme or so, make it very engaging, I think people might look forward to losing, maybe. Be like, oh, we're going to lose, awesome, we're going to be the resistance this time, so. A game is truly fun when you've lost horribly, but you still had fun losing and you have something to look forward to after you've lost. As always, take care, and I will catch you guys next time.